Beyond the Mic with Sean Dillon.
We're joined on the Starline by the winner of Pulitzer, Polk, and several other prestigious awards. His latest project examines the world of power and privilege. 10 30-minute episodes separate secrets from those who are hiding it. Host of Fallen Angels podcast reminds us to forget about it, Jake. It's Chinatown. We welcome author Paul Pringle.
Thanks for having me.
Paul, let's go beyond the mic. What was the first sign that everything wasn't kosher of a drug-abusing dean at USC?
Well, the first sign was that I learned of in the newsroom came from a tip from a manager at a hotel where a drug overdose occurred. And he was at the scene of the overdose with a young woman. And it was the young woman who overdosed.
USC has had scandals in the last 10 years involving conspiracy and bribery, the medical school accreditation revoked, the Varsity Blues scandal, drug cavorting medical school dean, sexual abuse by campus gynecologist, and sexual abuse by campus physician. I know people call the West La La Land, but USC make investigating them easy money for journalists.
It wasn't always easy, but there was plenty there. That's true. It was an amazing run of scandals at one university. I think it's probably unprecedented.
With all the problems, why didn't USC tighten down all the problems going on there?
Well, that's a good question that we've never really gotten a good answer to. It always comes down to leadership at that university, over two administrations, if you go back far enough. And there are some things to this day that really haven't been fixed. It's still not a very transparent place. And if you look at the heart of what was happening in most of these cases, it was about money. It was about bringing in, donations of students and a need just to pay the bills. It's a very large university. It doesn't have a very large endowment for its size. So it was constantly in need of money. And when that is governing your actions, things can go very wrong.
How difficult was it for you when you're not only fighting USC on these stories, not the city, but not one or two, but three editors from the LA Times that were all later fired?
It was very difficult, and thankfully I had help from my colleagues who were very brave to take on this story when there really wasn't much support for it, if any, at the top of the newsroom. It did take a long time, too much time, certainly, because of their reluctance to publish the story. And that's the main reason I wrote the book, to tell the stories that were behind the story of the scandals at USC, what happened at my own paper, people's personal stories, how it affected their lives, and that sort of thing.
The podcast is Fallen Angels, and Paul Pringle joins us beyond the mic for the Rocky Nate. All this is, Paul, is 8 random questions. Answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. There is no pressure. What's your favorite crime novel of all time?
My favorite crime novel? Oh, that's a good one. Well, I'd say anything by Elmore Leonard. And very hard to separate the best from his work.
What's the hardest lesson for you to teach a kid when you were a journalism instructor at Cal State Northridge?
How to earn people's trust when you're getting them to tell you things, trying to persuade them to tell you things at risk to themselves. Now, of course, your job is to minimize, if not eliminate, that risk. But that can be a very difficult thing to do. And that's where these stories come from people who have the courage to do the right thing and to speak to us, even though it is at some peril to their own themselves.
Favorite place to write stories for the Daily Collegian at Penn State?
Again, that's probably my apartment. The newsroom was too noisy.
Do you remember the topic of your first article as an LA stringer for the Dallas Morning News and Tampa Tribune?
I can't say that I do. It was so long ago. But
best thing about your wife, Joanna?
Oh, her patience, I think, including starting with me. Her tolerance, her high level of tolerance.
My wife's named Joanna too, and all Joannas have a long, long, patient line. Who's the young journalist that we should be reading today?
I would say there's quite a few at the LA Times, certainly. Aline Chekmedian at the LA Times. She's worked with me on investigations. Adam Elmarek, he was one of the USC team members, as was Matt Hamilton. Yeah.
Paul, what's the one hobby you enjoy when you're not uncovering bad actors?
Oh, playing music.
What instrument do you play?
I play, well, and play is the operative word. I could never do it not good enough to do it for a living. Guitar, keyboards, harmonica.
Have you ever entered a talent contest?
No. There's a limit to the humiliation I can withstand.
It's time for the back half with Paul Pringle. His podcast is The Incredible Fallen Angels, and he joins us beyond the mic. What's the one fact that amazed you from everything you discovered?
Well, to tell the truth, it was how difficult it was to get the story published. I never saw that coming. The first story was killed, by the top editor. And that sort of thing just should never happen, ever, in a newsroom. So that's the one thing that will always stick with me. It was traumatic, the way that we could not get this story into the paper for so long.
It's time for two big questions with Paul Pringle beyond the mic. Why is it important for institutions charged with protecting the vulnerable continue to challenge authority, and in some cases, flawed leaders for justice?
Well, 'cause that's all we have. And again, people very often come to us, the newspaper, only after they went to all of these other institutions that are responsible for protecting them and, to bring them justice. And that's what happened in this case.
So what does the word justice mean to you?
Again, doing the right thing, making people whole who were injured, punishing the guilty, things that I think, we all want to see happen. And that did not happen here.
How do journalists keep editors from trying to kill a story from happening again?
Well, I hope it doesn't happen very often. It never happened to me before. Nothing like this, a story this important. And I think the fact that what happened to them in the end certainly sends a message. And things could not be more different today at the LA Times. As soon as a new ownership, local owner, the Soon-Shone family, new editors, our next story on USC about the gynecologist who was abusing young women for decades, we had no trouble getting that published at all. We had the full support of the top editor. And that continues to be the case on these types of stories.
Earning people's trust is the biggest lesson for journalists. He plays music to relax and wants you to read his book, Bad City, listen to his podcast, Fallen Angels, author, podcaster. From the LA Times, Paul Pringle, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
Well, thank you very much.
And that, my friends, is a Beyond the Mic shortcut. If you're enjoying these conversations, please check out another Beyond the Mic episode to find more actors, artists, and people you need to know. We'd also appreciate a like and subscribe on the Good Pods app.